This story is called The Mermaid. There can be few people who don't remember the dramatic rescue of the mermaid who was washed up, bruised and bleeding on the shores of Vancouver Island several years ago. Rescuers found her near the village of Tofino while they were searching among the debris following a tsunami. The story hit the conventional online news media with a force its own cyber tsunami. Unnoticed in the storm of publicity was that this event afforded a unique opportunity for scientific investigation about mermaid biology. Hitherto, no live mermaid had ever been found. Information about them was limited to the accounts of sailors who believed they'd seen them from afar. In popular imagination, mermaids are half woman, half fish, with their lower bodies covered in scales. This proved to be a misconception. The mermaid's body was smooth like the lower extremities of marine mammals, like dolphins and seals. Her lower limbs were combined in the form of a flipper. Her upper body was indeed like that of a human female, in her facial appearance and her human-like arms. She had dark tresses, dark eyes, and olive-brown skin, unlike the blonde-haired, blue-eyed mermaids of mythology. DNA samples revealed that she was a chimera, combining human and dolphin genetic material. Later, more detailed analysis showed that the non-human part of her DNA was that of the rare Barnard's dolphin. Dolphins in general can be suggestively friendly around human swimmers. Reproductive biologists speculated that a chance sexual encounter between a male human and a female dolphin had led by some fluke to the implantation of a viable fetus. After medical treatment, the mermaid was transferred in secret from a private clinic to an enclosure at the Vancouver Aquarium that had previously been used to house dolphins in captivity. I became involved in the story because my academic research involves vocalization between marine mammals. Dolphins communicate with each other by a variety of clicking sounds. The said to have an extensive vocabulary. I hope to be able to understand the languages of marine mammals in order to communicate with them. The mermaid came to my professional attention when the staff at Vancouver Aquarium noticed her producing clicking sounds like those of dolphins. Given her chimeric character, it seemed plausible that she might speak a similar dialect. I previously associated some of these with things like danger, predator, food this way, danger is over, and similar phrases through computer-recorded dolphin calls obtained in the wild. The Vancouver Aquarium housed the mermaid in an area that was close to the public, to avoid both crowds of disruptive onlookers and demonstrations against keeping her temporarily in captivity. Fortunately, these events had occurred at the beginning of the summer semester, when I had no formal teaching duties. I decided to divide my day by spending mornings with my university students and afternoons at the aquarium with the mermaid. I used a video camera to record our sessions and tried to make sense of them later. My first sessions with the mermaid went very badly. I got no response with any of my pre-recorded calls. After about 2 weeks of fruitless efforts, however, she began to catch on to the way that human beings use their arms. She beckoned me to go into the pool with her. Next day I showed up with bathing shorts under my usual attire. When greeted, I entered the pool. My mermaid friends greeted my entry into the water enthusiastically. She encouraged me to accompany her in laps around the pool, though her streamlined form made it hard to keep up with her. After a while, I decided to resume our training program, this time with much more success. Each time I played one of the recorded calls, I said the corresponding command aloud. If the mermaid were ever to understand spoken language, I decided it might as well be English. By pointing from me to her, I was able to get her to repeat some of the simplest commands. Food this way was accompanied by me throwing a mackerel to the far end of the pool, which she responded to by taking and eating the fish. However, after a few days of this activity, instead of eating the mackerel, the mermaid threw it to the other end of the pool, meanwhile clicking the same message to me. Everything went well. with new phrases being introduced both by me and the mermaid, until I tried to teach the idea of friend. I held out my arms in imaginary encirclement and beckoned her over. She responded to a call that in my fieldwork I described to joining other members of the pod. In order to explain what happened next, I must mention an aspect of research on Barnard's dolphins that I've previously overlooked. Like human beings, dolphins mate throughout the year. Mating is under the control of a gene called LBDO1. This is switched on year-round in humans and dolphins, but only in mating time in seasonal breeders. Barnard's dolphin has multiple copies of LBDO1. This genetic quirk makes Barnard's dolphins unusually highly active sexually. They have sex enthusiastically at every opportunity, usually in the belly-to-belly position. The human Barnard dolphin Gyomira, the mermaid has switched on copies of LBD1 from both parents. She clearly misunderstood my motives. She swam to me and encircled me in her arms, but that's not all. Reaching down, she wrenched my swimming shorts from my body and began fondling my private parts with some vigour. The aforementioned private parts seemed to respond of their own accord. Even though I'm embarrassed to say so, we ultimately proceeded to full intercourse, which, I must admit, turned out to be unexpectedly pleasurable. Back in my apartment that evening, I felt a conflicting mixture of shame and arousal at the day's events. I erased the video segment that depicted my act of bestiality. Suddenly I resolved this must never recur. The next day my mermaid friend greeted me exuberantly as I set up the video camera. As soon as I was ready to begin the day's instruction period, she immediately called to me with what I now recognize as the mating call and beckoned me into the water. I signaled no by shaking my head, but she would not desist. When I tried to run through our usual drills, she refused to cooperate. Instead, she smiled seductively. There was no help for it. I turned off the video camera, removed my shoes and entered the water. She was not big on foreplay, and when we had satisfied each other, we were able to turn to the day's official business. It was rather weird to realize that I, the species Homo sapiens sapiens, a scientific investigator with allegedly superior intellect, was now at the mercy of a libidinous half-dolphin. From that day onwards, the mermaid and I came to an arrangement called a modus vivendi. She would participate in my scientific program, but only after I had participated in her copulatory program. It was doubly fortunate the aquarium's dolphin enclosure was completely off limits, so my scientific studies would not be interrupted. Hence our copulatory activities also remained private. It was certainly more than a fling, but less than a romance, and plainly at some point it had to end. No, we weren't caught in the act. One day the mermaid tried to explain to me that she had to return to the ocean to be the other side of her ancestry. I understood, but not without regret. One can't have repeated amorous interactions with another being, even of a different species, without developing a sense of attachment. And that's exactly what had happened. By now the summer semester was ending, and so it seemed quite normal for me to tell my research sponsors it was time to return the mermaid to the ocean. I decided to release her where she had originally been found at Tofino, hoping that her dolphin pod might be in the vicinity. On a late August morning, we transferred the mermaid from Vancouver Aquarium in a regular bathtub. A crane lifted the combination of bathtub, water and mermaid onto a flatbed truck and thence to a waiting ship in Vancouver Harbour. Upon arrival at the dock at Tofino, I felt a great sadness for my impending loss, not just of a scientific subject or a sex partner, but a creature who had become a friend for the summer. As the ship's crew began to lower the bathtub into the ocean, she clicked goodbye as we had come to do at the end of each afternoon, and I returned the call. I waved and she waved back. When the bathtub reached the open ocean surface, the mermaid dived over the side, disappeared between the gentle waves, and was seen no more, as my eyes became watery with tears. Time, it said, is the great healer. Over the next few weeks and months, my grief gradually assuaged itself from an aching hole in my heart to emotions that combined regret with a curious sense of joy. I'd experienced a unique privilege, intimate contact with a creature that literary authorities have tried to imagine with the pen. I'd also had profound professional satisfaction, having opened up the whole field of human-dolphin communication. And I received several invitations to speak at scientific conferences. The next year, on or about the anniversary of the release of the Mermaid into the ocean, I made a nostalgic visit to Tofino as part of an early autumn weekend vacation. I took my broadcasting equipment with me on the off chance, more out of sentiment and reminiscence than expectation. I set the unit up on the little dock and advertised myself in dolphin dialect, using the message that the Mermaid and I had developed as a personal recognition, essentially, "Hello, it's me." To my astonishment, as the sunlight sank lower towards the Pacific Ocean, I received an answering call, and after a few minutes the Mermaid's head broke the water's surface. She then made the call come to me. Oh no, I thought, we can't have sex here in public. Anyway, I'm not dressed for it, and besides, the water of the Alaska current is far too cold. But that's not what she wanted. She came right up to the deck, reached down and held up an infant child. She pointed to the child and then to me, back and forth, back and forth. Then she placed the child on the edge of the dock. She clicked goodbye twice, then swam away as the sun made its fiery descent into the ocean. I was too astounded to know what to do, and so I did nothing. What did this all mean, and what was I supposed to do about the little being who had suddenly come into my possession? It was a boy, probably about 6 months old. He didn't cry. I wrapped him in the light jacket I'd brought with me, got into my car and turned on the heater for warmth. Gradually I began to understand. This child was mine. It was my son. So that now explained the Mermaid's sudden change of behaviour the year before. She'd become pregnant with my child. She needed the security of the open ocean. At some point earlier this year, she must have given birth to this baby. He was three-quarters human genetically, but was entirely human-looking as a boy, save perhaps that his skin had a slightly rubbery, dolphin-like texture, giving him a slight chubbiness. Suddenly I was a father. I was filled simultaneously with excitement and anxiety. How does an unattached male look after a son? I didn't even have the advantage of having looked after the younger siblings. I'm the youngest of 3. But first things first. Fortunately, this was still the end of the season. I reserved a motel room before leaving Vancouver. At least we, had somewhere to stay. My first priority was supplies. After all, I am trained as a scientist. Diapers, clothes. Luckily, some stores were still open. Without formula, bottle and teats, would I need pureed baby food? I'd better get both, I thought. I found a little basket to add to the temporary bassinet. I took my purchases back to the motel room, dressed my small charge and carried him around in his basket. I tried both formula and puree, discovered that his wonderful mermaid mother had weaned our son before handing him over to me. I put my son to sleep beside the bed in the motel room. He slept like a small cherubic angel, but I lay awake. How does a man explain his sudden appearance with a small baby that he claims was his son? How would I introduce him to my mother, my sisters, my friends, even my graduate students? What name should I give him? I could hardly tell them I'd given the mermaid pregnant. Apart from anything else, no one would believe me. And how does one go about registering the birth of an approximately 6-month-old child whose actual birth date you don't even know? I spent a couple of days in my apartment and called in sick at work. I hadn't a clue what to do. Eventually, and I know how weak this sounds, I called my mother. "Mom," I said, "I've got a big problem. Can I come over and see you?" Now, given that my mother lives in Calgary, this wasn't just popping over for a cup of coffee. "What on earth's the problem, Jason? Is it about a girl? Have you lost your job?" "Look, Mom," I said, "I can't discuss it over the phone. I'll see you tomorrow." I got a flight, rented a car at the airport and drove to my mother's house where I grew up. She lives alone since Dad died. I showed up with a baby carrier swinging from my arm. I'll leave out the surprise, the cooing, and of course how supportive my mother was, as only mothers can be. Here's the problem, I said. How can I get a birth certificate for someone I don't know, exactly when he was born, or where, or even his mother's name? People who've registered births might think that I bought him somewhere foreign and stole him. Mothers have an amazing ability to keep calm. Look, here's what we'll do, she said. I'll come home with you to Vancouver. I'll look after the baby while you get things organised at work. You get the paternity test to make sure he's really yours, then we can go and try and register the birth. But one thing, he does have to have a name. Yes, I thought of that. I wanted something traditional. I like the name James. I thought James Barnard had a nice ring to it, but it occurred to me it might be a too close connection to the Mermaid. So for the moment we settled on James, not Jim and not Jimmy. Mother was as good as her word. How pathetic, a university professor having to rely on his mother. The lab expedited the DNA results, which showed that James was indeed my son. They noted that the mother's apparent genetic makeup was rather unusual and asked if I wanted them to do a search like those on Ancestry CA, but I said it wasn't necessary. It was quite a performance at the registry office, but the registry clerk was unexpectedly sympathetic. I agreed to identify mid-May as May the 15th and the place of birth as Tofino, Vancouver Island. The clerk said that she sometimes had to register births where the father was listed as unknown, but she'd never come across the mother as the unknown parent. But she said, I don't see why we can't. And after consultation with her manager, I imagined the birth certificate in the name of James Barnard Price. Yes, I felt I had to acknowledge James's real mother. Mum stayed at my apartment for 6 weeks. I don't know what I would have done without her. It wasn't just babysitting, I was being taught all the things I needed to know about being a single dad. Fast forward 3 years. James loves his preschool. I put him into swimming classes and outside activity. I guess it's hardly surprising, but the other parents say he's a natural, if only they knew. Privately, I have hopes for him as an Olympian. But even better news, we're now a proper family. Last year I met Tracy McAllister, a former grad student at a conference. I'd not seen her for several years. Over dinner at a Mexican restaurant, she admitted that she secretly had the hots for me when I was her supervisor, but she'd never said anything. Cut a long story short, we married last April. Right now, Tracy's in her second trimester with James' little sister.